You're listening to Wisp Sports Radio's Powder Run, the skiing show. And here is your host, ski coach and former US team ski racer, Jessica Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Powder Run. I'm happy to be back again and give a little recap of all the World Cups that have been going on since I last was with you guys over a month ago, leading into Solden. There's been a lot of exciting stuff going on. We're now 4 World Cups into the season on the Women's World Cup Tour. We had the GS in Solden that I previewed on last episode, and then a Solomon Levy. And then this past weekend, we had a really exciting series of races in Killington, Vermont. It was the first time that the East Coast of the U.S. held a World Cup race in about 25 years. So it was a pretty exciting time for everyone back there. And it was the first time it had been in Vermont since 1978. So if you had a chance to check it out, there were lots and lots of fans. It was a pretty cool thing to watch on TV. I know I had a lot of family that was there. My mom was actually a gatekeeper, so she was seeing it up close and personal. So it was a pretty cool thing to see. Before I get into that recap, we'll also be talking a little bit about the Lake Louise World Cup coming up this weekend. There's also been a lot of news regarding injuries with a lot of well-known names that have happened the last few weeks. There's a lot to catch up on. We'll start with a recap of Killington, which was, like I said, very exciting. That was the most spectators for a Women's World Cup, and I believe that's also in the United States or in North America. They had a lot of things that were exciting to watch. On Saturday in the women's GS, the conditions were not ideal. It was warm, it had been raining, and then the snow came in, and the course workers did an amazing job to keep the course as safe and as in the best shape as possible. And the first run, we saw Nina Losa starting first, come down with the fastest run, which wasn't really that surprising. A lot of times when the conditions are bad, you'll see that. But what was kind of a surprise was Laura Goot, who won the opening World Cup in Solden, was way ahead at the first split and then finally went out. And so that kind of opened the door for a lot of people to really step in there and have some good results. And one of the ones that really stood out to me, and I mean to everyone who I'm sure was watching the race, was Tessa Worley, who ended up ultimately winning the race. But she had been out. She missed the 2015 season with a knee injury, and then last season came back and wasn't quite back to the form she was when she won the 2013 World Championships in GS. And the first run, she wasn't one of the ones that got to start right at the beginning, and she moved into second place. And when I was watching the second run, I kind of just had a feeling. I was like, I think she's going to end up winning this race. She skied so well in rough conditions, and she did end up taking the win, it was very impressive, her skiing. And Nina Loseth, who was the winner of the first run, ended up second. Third place, which I was watching and I was thinking about all the different people who are trending up and trending down. And one of the groups that really, really stood out and was so incredibly impressive were the Italian women. They had 8 people in the second run and 5 in the top 10 alone. Third place was Sofia Goggia, who it was her first World Cup podium in giant slalom, and she was followed in fourth place by her teammate Marta Bassino, who was third in Solden. So that team is just so impressive right now. It's really incredible to see. I was looking at it, and the Americans had 1 girl in the second run, and the Italians had 8. It's just really, really amazing to see what that team is doing. And I think it kind of shows that if you have a strong team or if you have a couple at the top, it really spreads out throughout the whole field. When you have, they had Brignone last year win Solden, and then you have some veterans like Manuela Moog, who's been around for a long time, and it just helps bring up the level of the whole team. And now you have these young guns with Bassino and Goggia doing so well, and it's pretty cool to see what they've been able to do. You had Francesca Marsalia in the top 10, Irina Curtoni, who's been around for a while. It spread out throughout that whole team, and they just were so, so impressive. And then you had Michaela Schifrin. Also, she was second in Solden, came out in front of the hometown fans. She grew up on the East Coast, went to Brook Mountain Academy, which wasn't very far from Killington. She had tons and tons of fans there, and she finished 5th in that GS, which for her has been a decent result. She's obviously the most dominant slalom skier in the world and probably one of the most dominant slalom skiers we've ever seen. And so the 5th place opening in that GS, she said she was kind of disappointed with it, but I think it was a solid result for her. And then going into the slalom, she was really able to shine in front of this huge crowd that came to see her and came away with the win on that day. So the slalom with Michaela winning was no surprise. And the fans that were lining, I mean, I have never heard that type of noise in the U.S. at a ski race before with her when she came down winning. It kind of gave me chills watching it. It was really cool to see and to know, I grew up on the East Coast, and to see all these people that were there that were so exciting. For a while on social media, every time I looked, it was like every person I knew was in Killington watching this World Cup. So that was pretty exciting to watch. And with that, in the slalom, there were a lot of kind of the regular names you expect to see. You had Veronika Zuzalova finishing 2nd, Wendy Holdener, she was 2nd, and Levy, she got another podium to start off the season, finishing in 3rd. Nina Loseth, 4th. Petra Vlhova, who last year, she's the same age as Michaela, only 21. She won her first World Cup last year and has started off the season so far with a 3rd and then was 5th in Killington. So there's been a lot of kind of what you would expect in the slalom, but, it's still pretty exciting to watch. And Michaela now has won a record 10 slaloms in a row. She did miss part of last season, as you'll remember, with a knee injury, so they're not consecutive. It wasn't consecutive World Cups, but every one she has started, she's won the previous 10, which dates back to the end of the 2015 season. So we'll see how long that streak continues, which with the way she's skiing, I think it's hard to really imagine her having a lot of competition coming up. She's just so dominant in that event. And I thought it was really interesting watching her when she came through the finish on the second run. She normally has no emotion whatsoever. She just comes through, looks at her time, and it's like, I won again. That's how I read it. And she gave a big fist pump, which you don't really see, and you could tell how much it meant to her to win that race on the weekend. And so as I kind of reflected on the weekend, I started thinking about how things have been going. And I kind of was deciding that looking at the people that are trending up, or the teams that are trending up coming into the season. And, as I mentioned before, the Italian women definitely trending up with 8 in the second run on Saturday and some strong results again on Sunday. And then you also have Michaela. Like I said, she's so far been on the podium in 3 of the first 4 races of the season. She's leading the overall standings. She's going up to Lake Louise to get in some speed races. So definitely on the up and up. Nina Loseth was another one that really stood out to me, finishing 2nd in the GS, 4th in the slalom. She was a little start off kind of slow at the beginning of the year in Solden and Levy, and now looks like she's really getting on form. And then also just kind of the young skiers in general. There were a lot of not new names up there, but you had Sofia Goja, Marta Bassino. She's born in 1996. That was 4th. You have Michaela, obviously. Petra Vlhova that I mentioned earlier. There were a couple young Austrian girls that got in there. Katarina Truppe, Canadian girl Valerie Grenier, also only 20, that got a second run in both of the World Cups. So it was pretty cool to see the young ones starting to make their mark on the World Cup tour. And then as far as the ones I've been thinking about that have kind of been trending down, you have the Austrian women in GS. They had no one finish in the top 10, which kind of goes back to some of the injuries that I was mentioning earlier in the show that we'll get into in a second, but they lost their overall GS champion from last year, Eva Maria Brem, with a broken leg right after Solden. Anna Veith, formerly Fenninger, still has not come back from her injury. So there's a lot of improvement for that team. And in the GS, their best finisher was Michaela Kierkasser in 16th place. So a team that you normally see really dominate seems to be maybe not finding their form quite this going early in the season. And in the slalom, they were a little bit stronger. They had Bernadette Shield in 8th and Michaela Kierkasser in 9th. But overall, they just seem to not be quite on par with where they've been in the past. So that was kind of, what I noticed a lot from that opening World Cup in Killington. It was very, very exciting to watch. I thought it was pretty cool, everything that was happening, and it's kind of leading into the start of the season, really setting up to be an exciting year with the way things are going. So on away from the tech and into the speed, today was the first training run in Lake Louise. And Lake Louise always is, Lindsey Vonn has just dominated there for however many years it's been. I can't even remember now. It's been so many that she has dominated. Last year, she swept all 3 events there. She has won a record number of World Cups there, and she is unfortunately back on that injury list. She is probably the biggest name on that list currently. She was in Copper, Colorado, training speed event and fell and ended up breaking her arm, and she broke her upper arm pretty badly. It was a spiral fracture, and she actually in an interview over the weekend said it was the most painful injury that she's had, which coming from her and the number of injuries she's had is definitely saying a lot. So that event is going to be completely different without her in the mix. It's hard to even predict who to expect to win. If you look back on last season, you had Connie Hutter, who finished in the top 3 in all 3 of the events. You had Tina Weirather have some strong results, Victoria Rebensberg, Fabian Suter. Then you can never count out Lara Gut, who today in the first training run was the fastest. It's really hard to judge a lot from the first training run because sometimes people are just trying to get into it. There's people who miss gates and it doesn't reflect on the result sheet. So it's hard to know a lot from the first training run, but you can at least get an idea of where people are standing. So I would say going into that, you have kind of Lara Gut would be the favorite in my mind, and her teammate Fabian Suter is always one to watch for. Tina Weirather, she has done well in the past in Lake Louise, especially in the Super G. So she really can be another one that could sneak in there and eke out some wins without Lindsey there. And that's kind of really what it's about, is finding, it's kind of like last season when Michaela Schifrin was missing. It gave other athletes an opportunity to win some slalom races. And that's kind of how I look at it in Lake Louise. It's going to give some other athletes an opportunity to finally win some downhills up there without Lindsey being there. Another athlete that's done well there in the past is the American Stacy Cook. She's had a couple different finishes in the top 3, so she's always one to look out for. Who else? I'd say Frederica Brignone. She finished really strong in the Super G standings last season. So in that Super G race, she actually has said she was going to focus more on speed events, and then she raced in the slalom on Sunday and won the second run. So you never know with her. She's always full of surprises. Her style of skiing is always aggressive and never holds anything back. So in speed events, that'll take you pretty far. So it's always something to look for. So without Lindsey, we're also going to be missing Larissa Yerkrew, the Canadian. She finished 3rd in the downhill standings last season. She retired at the end of the year. Anna Fenninger or Anna Veith is also still out with injury, so that's another big name that we're missing. And so it's kind of going to be one of those ones that I can't wait to watch and see how things turn out. It's really going to be different for sure this year, and I can't wait to see what the end result will be. So going back to those injuries, not missing out on Lindsey is going to be a huge void on the Women's World Cup Tour. And as I mentioned, talking about the GS races, Ava Maria Brem is going to be out as well for the whole season with a broken leg. The Austrian Carmen Talman also, she bled her knee training in Copper leading into Killington. She finished 10th in Levy in the slalom. She's another athlete that's going to be out. And right after I was with you guys last for episode 1 of Powder Run, Tina Maze announced her retirement. We were kind of speculating what would end up happening with her, and she ended up, I think it was the very next day, announcing her retirement. So kind of a different look, I'd say, going into these opening speed races here. And with the tech already kind of in full throttle, I think we're gonna learn a lot about what's going on in the Women's World Cup Tour this year and see where things stand. After the past weekend, Michaela Schifrin's leading the overall standings, and Laura Good obviously was last year's overall champ, so I think she's probably really going to be gunning for a lot of points in these 3 races. But Michaela's going to be up there and trying to gain some points in the speed events to hang with those skiers that are 3 to 4 event threats. So I think it's one of those things that the season is full underway now, and we're just going to have to keep watching and seeing how things pan out. Can't wait. And you never know how things will be. Women's speed races, especially in Lake Louise, always have surprises. The weather can be super inconsistent. Sometimes you have someone come down from the back of the pack and pop into the top 3. It seems like it happens, I'd say, I don't know, 50% of the time. It seems like something like that's happening. So can't wait to see what the weekend brings. I will be back next month again to bring you all the latest on the Women's World Cup Tour. We have so many exciting races coming up in the next few weeks, so there'll be lots and lots to talk about. Also, don't forget to check all of the episodes of Powder Run on WISSports.com, as well as all the other global sports podcasts that are on WISS Sports. I look forward to being back with you next month to talk more about the Women's World Cup Tour. Thanks for listening. I'm Jessica Kelly. Until next time.